And it's like, I wish you flushed out this idea a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff.
In the interview.
Yeah.
We're watching you.
Do you have anything to say to the camera?
This album, top 4.
Top 4.
Oh no.
2, 3, 4. By Slugs.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Are You In? As you can see, I have a special guest with me today. Meet my good buddy, Frankie.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. We play a lot of music together, and we like to listen to a lot of music. As you can see, this is where the magic happens. Yeah, he likes to eat his guitar as well. So anyways, tonight on Are You In? We're actually not going to be talking about one CD, but 2 CDs, which are
Automata, Uno, and Dos by
Dos.
Between the Buried and Me.
Between the Buried and Me. So for those of you who don't know who Between the Buried and Me are, they're a progressive metal band from Raleigh, North Carolina. They have 5 members, which are Tommy Giles Rogers Jr. on lead vocals and keyboards, Paul Wagner on lead guitar, backing, and lead vocals, Dusty Waring on rhythm guitar, Dan Briggs on bass and backing vocals as well as keyboards, and Blake Richardson on drums. And then they've had plenty of CDs. They have their debut album in 2002, which is a self-titled album, Silent Circus in 2003, Alaska in 2005, Colors in 2007, The Great Misdirect in 2009, The Parallax 2 Future Sequence in 2012. They also had Part 1 in 2011, and then Coma Eclectic in 2015. Now, I am more of a I'm more of a mainstream fan. I haven't listened to as much as Frankie, so I'm going to hand the mic over to him for a second to tell me, like, what got you into Between the Buried and Me? Like, what do you know about them?
Yeah, so I've been into Between the Buried and Me probably since the mid-2000s when I first got into metal music in general when I was a teenager and whatnot. And yeah, they're a cool band. They're one of those that really are pioneers in the progressive metal genre. They're one of those, I think they're originally with Victory Records in the 2000s, and they're one of the first technical progressive metal or progressive death metal, whatever you want to call them, bands out there. And a lot of other, bands sort of spread it off and copied, or not copied, but at least, sort of took some of the ideas that Between the Buried and Me put out and used that in their stuff. So they were pioneers, you could say, in the early 2000s, and really put progressive metal on the map. I think that some of their biggest ones are probably Alaska and Colors, because Alaska was probably the one where they got the most, probably the first album they had that really put them on the map.
Okay.
It made them pretty big.
And then out of the 2, you'd say probably Alaska and Colors are your favorite?
I know that's a cop-out, but I do think that Alaska and Colors are my favorites. Just because Colors is amazing. I don't think there's a bad track on it, and Alaska, since it put them on the map, I think that it gets, it's up there as the 1 and 2.
Well, that's fair. I definitely see like what this band's influence is on the scene. Personally, for me, I remember my first delve into it, oddly enough, was Rock Band 2. They actually had prequel to the sequel on that one, and I just found it so interesting, and I didn't know like if I liked it or not, because just like it was so sporadic in its sound, and like you have this 4 or 5 minute song and it's going through so many different ideas, and there isn't really a band that I can think of at this moment that kind of sounds like Between the Buried and Me. Like there's plenty of them that copy them, but there's not any that I can think of that sound like Between the Buried and Me. So I will say, as I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of like screaming vocals or grungy vocals, especially if I can't understand what the words are saying, like what they're saying. So the prequel to the sequel kind of put me off for a little bit, but I checked out Coma Eclectic on the word of my brother being like, hey, you need to check this out. I think this would be right up your alley. And I agree. I think that's where it's a little bit more, it feels a little bit more Dream Theater-esque in the style of what they're producing, and there's a little bit more clean vocals, so I really like that. And I checked out some of their other stuff right before we both saw them in March at the Royale, which was an amazing concert. They are incredible performers. The way that they can play a 13-minute song and be seamless and stop it in the middle to start it again is like incredible, and that's like an amazing thing for a musician to be able to do.
Yeah, for context, I think someone got injured in the pit, but they were fine, so it's not a big deal.
Right.
And yeah, Tommy was kind of pissed, which was funny. He was like, "Really, guys?
We had like
Didn't
three.
you say something like this is the second time this tour.
This is like third time this tour.
Yeah.
And like, come on, guys, we have like 2 minutes left.
You sound like an angry dad vibes.
Like, come on,
Seriously.
So it's really cool to be able to see that. Since then, I like Colors. I'm not as huge onto it as everybody else, but I can commend it for doing what it is, which is literally one whole song spanned over 6 or 7 parts over like 50, 60 minutes, which is insane for me to be able to think of. I've listened to Parallax. I also like that one as well. And when context for this one, when Condemned to the Gallows came out, I was really excited to see this particular one because it kind of felt a little bit of that style of Coma Collective with a little bit more simplistic ideas tied into some of their more heavier stuff. I loved the beginning riff, and it made me so excited to see and hear the first part. So we'll start at least with Automata 1. What do you feel about that one?
Yeah, so just the context with the album, sort of like Parallax, it came out where Automata 1 came out in, what was it, March of 2018, and Automata 2 just came out earlier this month in July 2018. And my first impressions was with Parallax 1. I loved it. I think that it's a really solid album. I think it's their most solid album since Colors because it's able to take all of the prog aspects from Coma Ecliptic and some of the heaviness from Colors and then just synthesize it in a way where there are no bad tracks, in my opinion.
Right.
I think that it's a very cohesive album. I think that they do some of the coolest things they've ever done as a band on this song Blot. Like I was saying, Condemned to the Gallows is one of their best opening tracks in any album they put out, in my opinion. So I was very impressed by it, and they just seem very comfortable in making it. It looks like they know what they're doing. They know what they do as a band. They know what they do well. Right. I think they hit all that, and I'm very impressed with Automata 1.
I agree. Like they've been around for almost 20 years now, so like they know what they're doing at this point, and it's really cool to see. Like, yes, you have your standard like all like songs that are like doing many different things at once over a large span. Yellow Eyes is that one where it's taken a lot of different ideas and going a lot of different ways. Kind of the same thing with Blot a little bit, where it has a couple of different parts. But like, what's also cool for me is that they're also able to be simplistic with their complexity, if that makes sense. The ones that stand out really well for that is Millions and Condemned to the Gallows. Millions, very simplistic in nature in terms of guitar lines, but still very interesting and still has a little bit of complexity with its 5/8 time in a lot of their parts. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Condemned to the Gallows. You have an intro line that's more arpeggiated and not as guitar. It's not as complex on guitar, but it has this moment where it goes into 9/4. So it has these little things thrown in, but still is good enough so that like maybe if you're more mainstream Between the Bear and Me friend, you'll enjoy it. And even if you're just a more progressive fan outside of it, I think you would enjoy it as a single. Yeah,
I think Millions is good because it takes all the good aspects that are off of Coma Ecliptic and Parallax and puts it in an easy to digest song that I think is really catchy. Mm-hmm. It's a cool song, and they played it live, and it was a slower song, less intensity, but everyone was like, yeah! So that was kind of cool to see, especially for any metal or heavy band when they play live a song that's not necessarily, I'm not talking acoustic, I'm talking like a slower song. It's cool when they're able to do it and get a really cool vibe from the crowd. Mm-hmm. So,
like, I like almost every song on the first part, and I like how some of these songs build onto each other. So the idea of house organ,
Mhm.
it has some ideas of Condemned to the Gallows, whereas it does get brought up later in the second half, which we'll talk about. But the only one that kind of just doesn't work for me is Yellow Eyes, only because of what I call the musical ADD, where they have this idea and they only use it for a little bit and then they keep going on. It's like, no, I want to hear more of this. I would love to have heard more of what you were trying to build. And then it feels at some point it's like, okay, how the hell did we get here over the span of 8 minutes? Like, I don't know, like, how, but we got here. So that's the only one that kind of just doesn't work for me. But all in all, a really solid opener to this 2-part album, and it made me very interested for the second part. But I believe that we kind of differ on the second part.
Yeah, my first impressions of the second part, Automata 2, I'm not a fan. I think that from the first track, they just start out as a jam band format, where it's, just wild guitar and, crazy drums, but Automata 1 wasn't jam band-esque. It was very tight, very cohesive, and they sort of go off the rails. So the album, it's 4 tracks. 3 of them are over 10 minutes long-ish, with 1 track that's an interlude in between. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't see the intensity that was on Automata 1, and I was a little bit disappointed. I think it did have some strong moments. I really liked the closing track, The Grid, the line, "We're all in this together," mm-hmm. that they repeat that refrain. I really liked that. I was a fan of that. I was also a fan of the third track as well.
Voice of Trespass?
Voice of Trespass. Yeah. There it is. Glad that you caught that. The middle part and end of Voice of Trespass was pretty good, but I just thought that the first part was disorganized. Mm-hmm. And I guess the last criticism I have of it is the closing track of The Grid. It uses the same melody that repeats over in the album that was in Automata 1 and throughout Automata 2, which is cool, and it's cool to see that, but it's a 9-minute track, and it wasn't as epic as I wanted it to be. Comparing it to White Walls and Colors or Silent Flight Parliament from Parallax 2, mm-hmm. where it's just an epic ending and you feel really good, and after it you say, wow, this is awesome. I didn't really get that from The Grid. Mm-hmm. I feel like it was a little weak. It ended with a slow guitar solo that went on for a couple minutes, but I just wanted more, and I know they could have done a little bit better. And I know that I'm a little bit critical, but...
So, yeah, and I echo some of his sentiments there. I do agree with the idea of the last song being a little bit too long, and a little bit too long without having the payoff. If you look into the lyrics of this album, it's talking about what happens if we were able to go into people's dreams and be able to see what they saw, and what would the ramifications be? Could we alter this person? Could a lot of diabolical things happen? And it's also very interesting if you also look at the lyrics on Genius. They actually it's actually written out by day 1 and night 1 and day 2. So it has an actual storyline behind it. But with this particular story, the kind of blandish, kind of slow guitar solo for 3 minutes doesn't really work. It's a beautiful solo. It just feels like it shouldn't have been there. That's my biggest criticism of that song, but I do think it's a nice closer if it was a little bit shorter. Same thing with the opening song, The Proverbial Bellow. I like it. I don't think it should have been 13 minutes long. I like the beginning of it. I think it feels like it's a nice transition of we're talking about going to people's dreams, and now we're actually doing it. This is whoa, we're going into the tunnel of people's dreams and stuff like that. And that's where the jam bendy part comes in. And I really like the guitar line on there. I do feel again, there were parts where my mind was drifting off during that song. And there's some very blah lyrics. The idea of pick up the phone, it's been ringing, I'm so alone, it's been ringing all your life kind of idea. As in they're on the first part, there isn't many where I would be like, this was a little bit too long. Blot, I would say maybe the only one where I felt like it could have ended like at 6 minutes, but I still enjoy the whole entire 10 minutes. There's a couple of songs on here where I'm like, okay, if we condensed them a little bit, it would have been better. I really, really like Voice of Trespass. I think it's a really fun and really cheesy song that gives it a little bit of a more standing out than some of the other songs on this part. I don't like how the lead singer sings that song. I've heard it better on bands like the Deer Hunter, where they do this cheesy kind of like ballroomish kind of song a little bit better.
Yeah, I didn't like how some of it, the lyrics on that song were just the death vocals that were processed through a filter while waltz music was going on. I thought that was just distracting.
Yeah, but like at least for the Voice of Trespass, I like how it built over the 8 minutes that it has. Glide, honestly, throw it out. Throw it out the window. You don't need it.
You heard it here, folks.
At least with Gold Distance, the other interlude song from the previous part, it's 1 minute, but it builds up so much tension, and it feels nice. Glide is 2 minutes of a waltz song where the lyrics are horrible, and it's just out of pace, and it feels so weird. It's supposed to build into Voice of Trespass, but honestly, just get rid of it. Like that's my one biggest criticism from it. But I love the diversity on this part. That contrasts, at least to me, very well against the hard hitting first part. Now it's like we got all of our interesting ideas out of the way, like more complex ideas out of the way. Now we're going to do something a little bit more diverse. And like I said, they've been doing this for 20 years. Like I'm curious to see what they can do, and they tried something a little bit different, and I think it worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overall impressions of Automata 1, I would give it a 9 out of 10. I think that it was the most strong offering since Colors, and they were able to incorporate all of the good things, like I said, from Parallax and Coma Ecliptic with the heaviness of Colors and some of the earliest work that they put out there. I think that the first part is seamless, and honestly, I could listen to it over and over again without making too many critiques or getting bored. But Automata 2, I think that they could have trimmed some of the fat from it. I think that they could have done a better job of just making it more cohesive. And honestly, I would say a 6 out of 10 for Automata 2. With both together as one album, I would give it a strong 8. I know that math doesn't add up, but I think that I'm a fan of it. I think that it's a really good album, and I think that it's absolutely some of the best stuff that they've done in a while.
Before I give my rating, I actually have one question for you. Do you think that you could listen to this particular album without part 2?
I think I could.
Okay.
I mean, part of that was because since it came out in March, I have been listening to just part 1.
That's true.
And part 1, the last song, Blot, ends a little bit abruptly because part 2 transitions into it. And I was just expecting a little bit more. If it were all part in one album on, one giant LP, then it just, I know it's supposed to tie in together, and they do a little bit of that on the grid on Automata 2.
Right.
But I just think that they get lost a little bit. It looks like they're a little bit less comfortable in Automata 2 than on Automata 1.
Yeah, I get that, and my biggest worry is that this was a cash grab. I hope it's not. I really hope it's not, because I get it a little bit. It's like it's very hard to find a single that you could have put out of those 4 songs, because one's 13 minutes, one's 8 minutes, one's 10 minutes, and one is an interlude song. So you couldn't have really done a single from there, which is a little bit, which is kind of frustrating. As a listener, it's like, okay, I have no idea when this is coming out. I have no hype for it other than what I've listened to. So you have literally no idea what it's going to sound like. So that's where I feel like it's a little bit of a cash grab. Like, okay, now we're just throwing these 4 on as like downloadable content. But so for me, I agree with Frankie. I really well, a little bit. Like, it's I wouldn't say it's a 9 for me, only because of the weirdness of Yellow Eyes. Like, again, it on the grand scheme, if it was one whole album at first, that wouldn't be a problem. But because it's one of technically 5 songs, for me, it doesn't work as well. And like I said, I think a little bit of block could have been put on another song. So for me, I would say it's an 8. I would say if you can get past a little bit of the ADD of Yellow Eyes, if you can get past some of the weird ass lyrics or just out there lyrics, you'll like it. Like I would say, one of the things, love the song Millions. Also a weird lyrically song where it's like millions. Watch them fly overhead. It's they have weird lyrics. If you've never listened to them, they have very weird lyrics.
But I thought it was a really good single.
I think it was too. But if you're a lyric kind of person, that might be like, eh. But if you can get past that, 8 out of 10. I think that the... Actually, I'm going to raise it to 8.5. I feel generous.
Good man.
The other one...
8.5.
8.5! Yeah. I would say the other one doesn't hit as well as the other, as Automata 1, but I do like the diversity. If they cut out a little bit of the proverbial bellow, if they got rid of glide, it would have been much better. I'm going to give it a 7.5 because of their diversity. So, like Frankie, I'm going to rate it as an 8 out of 10. I think it is one of the better progressive albums I've listened to this year. I think it's right now in somewhere in my top 25 albums of this year. Probably close to the top 15. I do enjoy a lot of it, and I will listen to it again. I have listened to it again plenty of times. I'm just curious to see what else they'll come up with, and I would love to see a little bit more of this diversity on some of their other albums. Hopefully, not as a two-parter anymore. You're hearing me between the Buried and Me. No two-parters.
No, they've been doing that the last 2 albums. It's, at this point, if they do it again, that would be a bit cheesy.
Yeah.
That would be kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, and that is our time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked what this kid said, like, we have plenty of other music that we would love to talk about, and I would love to have him back on. Especially on our Digging Through Discographies. I know there's plenty of bands I'll be talking about that you can definitely give your insight on.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, for on your end, if you like what we're doing, of course, like the video, share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, comment on what you think about this album, as well as some other albums you would like me to listen to this year, and just keep watching the videos. So tomorrow, I know it's pushed back a little bit, but tomorrow I'm going to be talking about part 4 of Linkin Park's discography, which is 1,000 Songs. I don't know if you ever listened to that album. It's a pretty controversial one on their repertoire. But
see, I'm a Meteor guy.
You're a Meteor guy. That's why I stick with him. But thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.
Cheers.